OpenCast. This is not TokuPortal, despite the fact that everybody on here is from TokuPortal. I am VashieV, and I'm joined with...
Decade.
King?
And Rye.
And we are talking about Kamen Rider Blade. And this will be a series overview, character, whatnot, that whole shebang. First time I've tried something like this, so let's see how it goes.
So let's all just go over real quick what we've seen of Blade. I watched Blade for the first time a few years ago. I just recently finished rewatching it for this podcast.
I myself have watched all of Blade for the first time here over the last, 2 months? I think it took me to actually watch all of it through.
Yeah, I've watched the whole thing as well, and I did rewatch a little bit. I got maybe up to episode 20, so that's still fresh in my mind. And I did recently rewatch the Missing Ace movie, although we might not talk much about that. King?
Kind of sort of the pair of fresh eyes on this situation, so you might want to expect a lot of questions coming from my end.
What King means by that is that she hasn't seen Blade. She's just here to hear what we're saying and give us her opinion based on what we are talking about.
I have seen parts of Blade, so I know some of it.
It's that, and for her to ask us to clarify shit, because there's some odd shit in this series.
But then again, it's Kamen Rider. When isn't it odd shit?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Vashie, was that yours?
Yeah, for those wondering about the ding, I'm cooking food. So, how shall we start this?
Let's start by going over some of our main characters, particularly how we feel about them early on. Let's start at the first arc here. So first off is Kenzaki Kazuma, Kamen Rider Blade, our main character. Blade is a heartfelt character. His whole motivations are a little unclear at the beginning. It seems like he's mostly just kind of doing it because it's the right thing to do, and also it's a job in this series, so he is getting paid for it, even if he's not getting paid very well. But Blade starts off as a pretty strong character. He doesn't really doubt himself too much, except for one point where another character kind of makes him worry, but he tosses that aside pretty quickly. How do you guys feel about Kenzaki?
Yeah, I definitely liked him right off the bat. One of the things that is really unique about him is his voice acting during the suit fights, and how much he freaking yells when Blade is fighting. It just makes the fight seem so much more intense instead of the usual grunts here and there.
Oh yeah, he's also a wholehearted actor. He puts his all into this.
Yeah, definitely. So he plays the role so well, and I think that's really what... I don't think there's many people who actually dislike Kenzaki as a writer. He's a pretty great character and actor.
Like, with this series, he's one of my favorite overall. Because, like you said, he's very well-rounded because of the way he yells during his fights. They're more intense, and the fact that he does this shit, A, because he wants to and it's the right thing to do, and because he's getting paid. Like, that was the unique setup for this series. I mean, yeah, there's been a few others like it. It's like, but it was wholeheartedly unique for me for Blade because I've not seen a lot of the previous writers and whatnot.
I think Blade was actually the first writer to be getting paid for it.
Right, because I don't even think most of the I don't even think Kabuto gets paid. Their similar setup is in Kabuto.
Kabuto chooses not to get paid because he doesn't want to work for anyone.
Okay, that's fair. But like overall, is like this is literally his job. His job is to literally go fight these monsters, rather than where everybody else it becomes like in Kamen Rider X, the whole exterminating the bugsters becomes part of his job because he gets recruited into this shit. Whereas that character, his job, he's a doctor. The bugster thing is just added on. It's like, in most of writers I've seen, it was never their job. It was just something they ended up doing. So that was a unique touch on it, and I really liked it. It's like Blade is officially one of my favorite Kamen Riders because of the way his character is so well rounded.
King, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, he does seem very lighthearted, very friendly. I found that, at least not obviously lately with all the new guys, it's kind of hard to find. I feel like the more friendlier writers are a bit fewer and farther between, especially like with his predecessor Fives, who I know isn't exactly one of the nicest guys in the world, and Kabuto, well,
Marry soon.
Yeah. So I feel like it's a nice change of pace between like his predecessor and his successor in terms of personality.
It's actually interesting that you bring up Fives. Fives is one of my favorite writers because he is such a flawed character.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody's got their different flaws, so.
Yep. But yeah, it is vastly different to compare him to Blade. I should also mention, why is Blade a rider? So why Kenzaki Kazuma? Because the villains in this series are called undead. They're monsters that fight each other. So to become rider, when they unseal the dead, they seal the undead away. Fuck. And then they can use their powers. And so becoming a rider is basically like borrowing the form of an undead, but you need a compatible user. So Kenzaki was chosen to be a rider simply because he can transform. He can do it. That brings us to the next rider, Tachibana, Kamen Rider Garen. Garen is an interesting character because in the first arc he's hit his height, the height of his career, and he is falling. He is becoming more afraid, and that fear is actually making him worse in battle. And it is turning into this vicious cycle for him. So we don't really get to see him what he's like at his best until after he overcomes this. It's actually a little off-putting the first time I watched it, but on a rewatch, this is actually like genius. And that's how I would describe this series. Genius.
Yeah, it definitely is a smart move because it just puts so much more pressure on the main rider to become the main rider right off the bat instead of just I'm gonna take it easy until maybe the second arc and then I'll get a bit serious. No, like because his senpai rider is just totally breaking down, Kenzaki has to get his shit together, and he does, and it's so damn well written that I can't honestly dislike Tachibana for being the way he is, especially once you get into why that is and stuff. With his friend getting screwed over by the rider system, and now he's kind of getting screwed over by the system. pretty damn well written.
Like I went and, like I said, I've just watched this one time through. It was like when I started watching it, I hated this character. Like I hated him because it's not just affecting him as a writer; it's affecting him as a person. So like it seems like throughout the first arc, he's just a giant crybaby. Like there's a legitimate reason for it and all that. It's like, but until it's fully explained, it's just wow, you're whiny. And I can see how, like, for people who've watched this series, why they would want to stop watching it, because it's something that would typically happen for a writer like halfway through the show or something, where some shit goes down and it makes them question everything and all that. Whereas with Tachibana, we didn't get that storyline. We basically jumped into, like, if this show had been entirely about Kamen Rider Garen as the main writer, we would have jumped into it like midway through the series, basically. And that's where we picked up for him. You know, he's already been a writer for a while, already been doing this, and it's taken its toll on him. Thinking back on it, it's genius, especially when he finally does overcome it all, and we get to see him at his peak. It's like I said, it's a genius tactic. It's like, but my only issue with it was it just seemed a little overbearing to start with.
Yeah, when I first watched Blade, I felt that Tachibana was the worst character on the show. And it actually, like, halted me from watching it. Like, I spent the longest getting through Blade's first arc than on any other Rider series I've seen. But once we got past this, like, the series just keeps getting better. And rewatching, I was able to get through all that stuff way quicker because I just understood it now. If you ever watch Blade, don't let the first arc turn you off. Even if it seems like it's a bit much to get into. The first arc ends at episode 15. If you can make it to that point, the series becomes immensely better.
And you know, it's like in rewatching it, is even that first arc is great because you understand what's all going on, why it's happening, and all that, which is unique for a series rather than it just being right off the bat. Here's everything you need to know. It was no, we're gonna play shit close to our vest with this series, and they did a lot with this series.
I can understand, like, the war-torn soldier thing. Like, the longer you use what makes you powerful, the more it's gonna drain you. And I can understand that. But why is he so scared to begin with?
It's never really made clear what starts him being afraid. He just kind of starts doubting himself for some reason, and we never really get too deep into it. The closest we see is in the very first episode. Garen is already out there fighting a monster. Blade, this is his first real mission. He's being sent out as backup, and then Garen ends up sealing the undead himself anyways. But then later, when they're talking to the chief, Tachibana is like, "Did you not have faith in me? Why did you send him?"
Okay.
He's clearly already, like, started his dissension, but that is the closest answer we get to what kicked it off. Like, we never get an actual answer.
Okay.
And the longer it descends, the more it goes from just him doubting himself to him literally thinking that the Rider system is going to kill him.
Oh, Jesus. Talk about battle scars.
So, putting the actual writers aside for a moment, let's talk about some side characters. Like Kotaro. This guy. He loves milk. Kotaro is a character that, okay, so the undead have been unsealed and they're out there, and so now the writers are going around trying to seal them up. That's interesting to the normal person. And that's who Kotaro is. He's the normal person. He wants to be a science nonfiction writer, so he's been studying the writers, and and he actually approaches Blade and says, "Hey, I want you to be the subject of my new book." And Kenzaki, because he was training with Board for 2 months, he was away from his apartment. And so when he gets back, his landlord has kicked him out because he didn't pay his 2 months rent ahead of time. So Kotaro offers him a room at his place. And that's pretty much Kotaro's entire character. He offers the main rider a room so he can study him and stuff. And it works out really well for him because his house ends up being like the base of operations for everything.
It is a pretty interesting setting. And then, especially with the dynamic of his sister and niece having the base of operations for Hajime.
We'll get into that.
Pretty crazy writing. Pretty bold writing, I must say. But yeah, in terms of him being a character, yeah, he's kind of like a puppy, and he just like follows the writers around. It's pretty great, and I felt like they've tried to kind of redo his character in some series, but it's just done so well in this one. And yeah, unless you really despise that kind of silly character, I mean, and he's not always silly too. He does have some really good, like the few times that Kenzaki doubts himself, he's always there and to kind of cheer him up and push him forward. So yeah, he's definitely a good character.
And him as a puppy is pretty much following him around like a puppy is pretty much a very good equation. He's like, because he literally does start doing that after a while. Because like I said, he's trying to write a book. He's trying to get all the information that he can on the writers and all that. So like anytime things start going down, and hey, there's my another ding. He ends up just following around initially to get information. He ends up having uses throughout the series, like helping to go find people, help take care of people, and all that. Like people that get hurt right before Blade and all them show up. But yeah, he was. It seemed like there for a while he could have ended up having a great character arc, and be able to flesh him out as a character. But they kind of seemed to drop him once they introduced the fourth writer.
They did give him a little bit more time, because when he finds out that Hajime is an undead, he like starts freaking out. Like, that guy is living with my sister and niece right now. That is not okay. I need to do something about it. I can't do anything about this. There's nothing I can do.
And that was a very good arc. I mean, it ended up, and the problem I have with that is it ended up amounting to nothing.
It ended up amounting to him being...
Because that got drug out through the majority of the series, but nothing really came of it. There's no real...
The entire time, like, he is pushing against Hajime. Like, I don't want to accept that guy. He's a danger to my family. I want him gone. What this amounts to is that he can't do anything about it. So he's forced to accept that guy is there, to the point where, as Hajime's...
Like I said, it seemed like something that got dropped off.
Well, as Hajime's character grows, Hajime starts being a bit nicer to Kotaro, and that's what gets Kotaro to start being like, maybe you're not so bad, but it'd be easier to hate you if you weren't being nice to me. And it's this conflicting dynamic here. It definitely doesn't go as far as it could have in terms of character development between the two, but what's there is nice. Overall, Kotaro is a good character. He's the normal human whose life is just being affected by all this rider shit that's going on, and there's nothing he can do about it. So, King, do you have anything to bring up here?
Milk, what every growing side character needs in life.
Oh yeah, this guy drinks so much milk.
There's one scene where, because they're all the old school like glass bottles of milk.
Hmm.
Like the easiest way I can equate them to like stuff we have here is like they look like sake bottles of milk. It's what they look like.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
This motherfucker in one episode literally brings in like 8 cases of them, and I mean like the milk like the pallet type size shit,
Hmm.
big ass milk crates full of them.
Like, there's this one episode where like he meets this girl and he kind of likes her, and the other characters are like, "Oh, you got a crush on?" He's like, "Hey, quit teasing me." He pulls out 5 bottles of milk and just starts downing all of them.
Oh
Kinda
my
cool, huh?
god. Jesus. He does seem like a shit. Like a good contrast to Hajime, and he at least he offers something for the other riders. Otherwise, there wouldn't be much of a point to him as a character.
So
Like out in my opinion, outside of him being like the comic relief character, which is kind of what he is, outside of him like giving the few moments of advice and motivating the few writers that roll through his place, he really kind of doesn't. So it's one of those things that is, for me, it's kind of hit or miss with him.
in the end, I feel like he does more than the guy from Fies that had the laundromat, the dry cleaners, that he was like letting Fies live at.
Well, in fairness, I've not seen Fives yet.
Okay, yeah. That character like just becomes irrelevant,
Like, so
other than
when,
the fact that they're living at his house. At least Kotaro here continues to try and stay involved. Even if it's just like, okay, I'm gonna go make sure my family's okay while things are going on.
so when, in other words, when I decide to actually sit down and watch Fives, and we end up doing a Fives cast for it, I may have to amend the statement I just made.
By comparison, you will find Kotaro more relevant.
Good to know. Actually, that boosts his character up a little bit, in my opinion.
The other character I'm talking about does get some like attention towards his own love interest, but it's far and few between. Moving on to the next character, Hirose. The girl from Board that took over for her father after he died. She ends up also moving in with Kotaro and Kenzaki with her equipment that can basically like detect the location of undead when they become active. That's her character. Just oh, the undead searcher found something. It is 20 kilometers south from where you are. She does have like this whole personal character about like she's pretty sure that her father may have been the one to unseal the undead to like try and discover why they're immortal to save his dying wife. But ultimately she doesn't get too much attention beyond that. It's unfortunate because she could have been a really good character, but there's already so much attention on the other characters that there wasn't any room for her beyond the few bones that she got thrown.
Yeah, she definitely could have gotten more attention, but I think the attention they did give her made her a pretty memorable character because, I mean, she starts off pretty headstrong and rough, and then she does kind of go through some hard times just trying to discover what the hell happened with her dad and stuff. So yeah, she does have some good development, but I mean, the main focus is the writers. So, oh well.
Right. 90% of her character was, hey, it found an undead, and it's X kilometers away from you. That was 90% of her character. She did get fleshed out pretty well, I think, once the story arc about her dad and all that came to fruition and played out was very, very well done. And for a character that didn't have much in the way of screen time or like in this case character development, it was very nice that they did that with her. It made her seem more like a character rather than just some bit part. And apparently she had a crush on Kentucky, in my opinion.
It definitely like kind of hinted at that a few times, but it didn't go far enough to actually like suspect anything.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, is that a part of her? Like, was there some kind of love interest going on?
Well, here's my reasoning for thinking that. There's a point where Blade gets kidnapped by a girl and basically blackmailed into following her around and helping her. Shortly after this happens, everybody's all worried about him because he's not on the map because he's not transformed, so it doesn't trigger the searcher. So they have no idea where he is because he never came home. So she calls him, and the girl grabs his phone, answers it, and basically starts calling Kenzuki a pervert. Apparently, like you do in Japan. Well, she hears it, and she almost breaks her phone by squeezing it because she's pissed off. So it seems to go from that I'm pissed off that he didn't call and let us know he's okay to the I'm pissed off, why do I care about you because you're off with some other girl. It kind of plays both sides of that coin a little bit, in my opinion, on that. With that, but that's really the only real good scene that would stress any type of love interest with Hirose.
And even then, you can kind of justify that her anger in that scene, in that, like, he didn't come home last night, I was so worried about his well-being because it's dangerous out there, and then he's being a sleazebag with some girl.
Because, like, him disappearing is literally after an undead fight. And a major undead fight.
Sorry.
What did you say, King?
Please tell me the girl wasn't undead.
No.
Damn it!
She was just a girl that found out he was a Kamen Rider and was trying to, like, abuse that fact so that he'd spend time with her. Because she was feeling lonely and, like, there weren't any real heroes in the world.
Because her situation at home was bad and she ran away.
Ew. Okay.
Her parents had died, so she was sent to live with a relative, and she was just being really angsty.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
I was about to call her a bitch, but then that made me change my mind, so...
She still acts like a bitch.
Yeah, oh yes, definitely.
Like, you kind of, like, feel for her situation, but that doesn't excuse half of her behavior.
Fair enough.
Yeah, especially during the fight.
Equivalent exchange. Jeez.
Because, like, there's an undead fight where she literally just acts like she gets really hurt. Like, fake blood and everything.
Oh
She drinks... She drinks,
just to
like...
keep them around.
She drinks, like, a red drink and then coughs it up.
Crying wolf a bit much? Jesus.
Anything more on Hirose, though?
No, not really for me.
Nope.
Okay. Now let's actually talk about Hajime for a bit. So, what are the...
Real quick.
Oh, go on.
Sorry, I forgot one thing, and it's to explain why everybody else, or why Hirose's staying at, the milk guy's house. Board got attacked and blown up.
Yeah, the Locust Undead fucking wrecks all of Board, and she is one of the few survivors.
Well, that makes a lot more sense now.
She survives because she hid in a closet. It sounds kind of dumb, but it worked.
It worked really, really well. Too bad nobody else thought of that.
Yeah. But yeah, Hajime. So, what are the undead? 10,000 years ago, the 53 undead fought each other, and the survivor would get their species to be the dominant species on Earth. The winner was human undead. Now that the undead have been unsealed again, they are fighting again. So this is where Hajime comes in. The foreshadowing that he is an undead happens incredibly early on. Like episode 2, he gets injured and he has green blood. You see him talking to another undead that he's fighting, and he's always talking about humans like he isn't one of them. So they were clearly like trying to make it clear early on, Hajime is an undead. He is Kamen Rider Chalice, and he is living with Kotaro's sister and niece. We'll talk more about them in a bit. Something else that I forgot to mention, though, is that this series has a deck of card theme to it. So each rider is a different suit. Blade is the spade suit, Garen is diamond, and Hajime is heart. And at this point in the series, there is no club rider. Hajime early on is really like antagonistic. Like, when I said he talks about humans like he isn't one, he also treats them like that. Like, he will just be unnecessarily aggressive towards Kenzaki and other people, except for Haruka and Amane. What do you have to say about him?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that right off the bat he's pretty bipolar, and it's not really because of, well, it's pretty obvious that it's not really his personality but his instincts as an undead. I mean, another ability that he has is that he can sense nearby undead and kind of speak to them telepathically, like they can send him messages. It's pretty weird, and that's what kind of flips his switch into killer fight mode. So yeah, right off the bat he's a pretty intense character, but it is nice that they also show his protective side. So yeah, right off the bat he's got a pretty good base, and I think they had a lot of room to work with going forward.
Yeah, Hajime was one of my more favorite characters through this series, because he had a very good dichotomy with him, with the fact that yes, he was an undead, because they did do a little bit to beat you over the head with that a little bit, to at least make you question it. And like anytime he's around undead, it's their instinct to fight. So the whole purpose of their existence is to fight the other undead. So he does it by transforming into Kamen Rider Chalice. There's a plot device later with him, but it goes from for him as a character, at least as a writer, it starts off with him basically just being an asshole. It's the easiest way to describe it. Anybody shows up, it doesn't matter if it's Blade, Garen, or whatever, he's gonna fight them too, at least to start with. And it seems more of a don't get in my way kind of thing.
He actively tells Blade, everyone is my enemy, including you.
Right. It's like, but he, like, initially it just seems more like he's doing it just to keep people at a distance, especially the writers themselves, because he knows at the end, you know, he's not dead, he has to be defeated too. So it's more a little bit more out of self-preservation for himself, but they ended up doing a very, very good job because they, with this particular character, with him being so different from everybody else, they really were able to work on him as a character and to build him up and, go to get you to go from he is an asshole to, okay, I understand him. I get why he's doing what he's doing, and it makes sense. Like, even thinking back on it, him basically pushing Blade and Garen out of the way, and because he does kind of do the whole there's only one need for one rider thing, which is a recurring thing. It's pretty much kind of true because there is only need for one overall. Because only one, with the idea of the Battle Royal, there can only be one winner. And that's the end of it. And he has set on self-preservation for him to be the one who wins, at least to start with. That gets into a whole other issue later on in the series. But they did a really good job of growing him as a character, especially as a writer, in my opinion. Because you get to see how much he cares and wants to protect Kotaro's cousin and niece, or sister and niece. I'm sorry. So he has that innate human desire to protect something that he cares about. So he was a very well done character, especially further on in the series.
Go on, King.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the first time I watched this, I felt like some of his character development was a little overshadowed by all of Tachibana's stuff, but rewatching it, I realized like I may have just been a little out of it. Like, there's so much there. They are building up so much early on in this series. It is unbelievable. From the very, like, seeing Hajime's character grow is a major plot point throughout this series, and they just start so early on.
And it's not a plot point for, like, an arc. It's a plot point for the entire fucking series.
Like,
from the moment he is introduced into the very final episode.
His relationship with Kinzaki is literally, like, the crux of the series. So, King, did you have anything to say?
Well, at first I wanted to call him a jackass, but
he is.
After hearing everything you guys said, I mean, he does seem like a good character, and
like, the whole point is that he does start off as a jackass.
But I mean, he does remind me a lot of like Ko Soldier and guys like him, because they do mean well. It's just
no, he doesn't. Not at the beginning. He does not mean well for anyone except for Amane. Like, he is borderline a villain at the start of the series.
Okay, well, fact is, he grew, and
yes, he does grow.
I think equating him to, like, if we're gonna, like, compare him to a character in X-Ed, he would be Taiga at the very beginning of it. With that, fuck you, I'm the only one that's needed. Get the fuck away from me and get out of my way. That is literally him at the beginning of the series.
I will seal all the undead. I will take all the Gashats.
Okay. Alright, so he was borderline villain at the start, so I'm allowed to call him a jackass for that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then he's a jackass who, in the end, became a good person.
Oh, definitely.
Yay!
Like, even with the very, very big twist at the very end with him, he's still a good guy in the end.
And that brings us to Haruka and Amane. So Haruka is Kotaro's sister. She's a widow. Her husband dies before the start of the series, leaving just her and Amane. And then, at some point before the series, Hajime shows up at their door asking for a room, and they give him one. And by the time the series starts, they see him as a member of the family. Especially Amane, who just idolizes him. Like, she pretty much treats him like a new father to her. Her attachment to him is almost like, how? How is she getting this attached to him? Haruka is mostly just there to be the mother. She doesn't really do too much. But Amane is actually like a big part of Hajime's character. Almost everything he does is for her, beyond just actually fighting undead. But yeah, one of the very first undead he fights, it's because it's attacking Amane's field trip, and so he goes out there to save her.
Like these two particularly is like it's a bit more to say that that her husband died, because there's a whole plot point involved around that. But yeah, the level of attachment that they have for Hajime is, it makes you wonder just how long he'd been living there, because this isn't like at the start of the series, it's not the attachment that you have with somebody who's been there for a month or two. This is somebody who seems to have been there for years.
So the undead were released 2 years before the start of the series. So I predict Hajime may have been living with them for about a year.
About a year and a half. Depends on how long it took for one particular thing to happen, which happened. We get information on like what, halfway through the series?
Yeah, but we don't have enough details to say anything, so we don't know like how far he had to travel.
Right. So it's one of those things, like there's not a lot of clear information on when things took place or how far away or anything like that. It's just we know something happened and then he moved in. So, but like I said, the level of attachment is obviously something. He's been there for longer than a few months. So I like with you, I'd go that he'd been there for at least a year, because like you said, he is literally a member of the family. Amane kind of has an attachment to him, like a father, like a big brother / and father, and at one point on a slightly creepy level.
Yeah, like
she says there's one point in it where she draws a picture, I think, and then gives it to Hajime and says that she's gonna marry him.
Like, if Amane was like an actual adult character, she would want to bone him. But she's a little girl, so
and it's to the point, and they kind of stressed that too, because during that scene, her mom kind of looked at her like she was fucking insane for a minute. Like she had a very, very worried look on her face.
Yeah, you can definitely extract some creepy undertones from that, but kind of on the surface it is just like a sad, kind of sweet attachment she has because, as you know, her dad's dead, and he kind of just shows up, not coincidentally, and takes his place. And then it definitely does give Hajime a whole nother level of depth in terms of what he does throughout the series to protect her and stuff.
Like, Hajime clearly sees her as a daughter.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, but yeah, her mom is a bit useless, but
she's there to be Amane's mom and tell her to go do her homework occasionally.
Yeah, and even then, she doesn't have much control over Amane. She's pretty wild.
Yeah, she has almost none outside of like the stuff that they do inside the cafe. She has none, and it's clear throughout the series because like Amane keeps taking off a lot.
King, do you have any questions about Amane?
Other than the fact that she's basically a plot device as a parental area for Hajime?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
then no.
That's actually the easiest way to put that.
The relationship between them is like really good though. Like you can see how much they care for each other. There, anytime Hajime steps out, she'll be like, "Oh, where are you going?" You'll be like, "Oh, I just need to step out." And then if he's gone for like a day, she'll be like, "But where is he though?"
Like they're because yeah, and it's to me it's one of the throughout the series it's one of the more well-rounded, for lack of a better term, relationships within the series. Like because you can actually tell how much they care. Each one of them care about each other. None of it seems one-sided, regardless of the motivations for it, or for the characters being in that situation. You can actually feel and understand just how much Hajime cares for Amane and her mom, and how much they care for him, especially Amane. Because yeah, there's a point where Hajime disappears for a few episodes, and the entire time she's just sitting there going, "No, he'll be back. I don't know where he went, but he'll be back."
And then she's watching the news, and like Hajime got caught on camera in the background, and so she runs to that location looking for him.
Where did he go?
He felt like because the undead were after him, he was putting them in danger, so he just ran away. And he just met up with this musician guy, and that's who was being filmed. And so she went out looking for him at just this random part of town.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, their relationship is like much so much better than some of the relationships or like sibling relationships that we've had. It's extremely well done, and it's emphasized throughout the entire show
This series is phenomenal.
pretty consistently.
Like, I would say that this is probably the best Kamen Rider series.
I'm very, very tempted to agree with you. Just with the way, if not for that very rocky start to it, like I said, or like you said, going back to it, it seems perfect with the way they did it. But with that initial playthrough, it does seem very rough to start. Other than that, this series, to me, set the bar for character development and plot twists and storylines and all that. And in the case of Hajime and Amane, character relationships. Those two have a better relationship than anybody else in this series. Anybody.
Now I want to take a moment to talk about the camera in this series. Yeah, during all of the fight sequences in Suit, the camera is straight, dead on, it knows what it's doing. But when people are just sitting around and talking, the camera doesn't hold... Sorry. The camera doesn't hold still. Like, you can tell that somebody is just standing there, and they may or may not be shaking it intentionally. Like, because it's just the kind of, like, jitteriness that your hands would normally have. But it looks really good in this series. Right?
It's been a while for me, so I can't really comment on that.
It's odd to look back at, but yeah, the camera, at least when they're talking, in some manner is moving. Even if it's not just a little bit shaky, or if it's panning or like swinging around a room, the camera is moving in some manner throughout the normal, day-to-day stuff. But with the Rider fights, it's almost perfectly still, outside of for edits and whatnot, intensity.
You can tell it's the difference between like a guy is holding this camera versus they have it on a stand on wheels.
Yeah, because like during like the fights and stuff, like you can easily tell it is on wheels because it literally just like pans perfectly smooth, whereas during most of the day-to-day stuff, it just seems kind of bouncy. Like it's really well done, and in my opinion, normally this type of stuff would irritate the hell out of me.
This is
But
like,
for this series, it works really well with this series.
yeah, like this is the kind of camera work that, like, it's just bad camera work anywhere else because the person doesn't know how to hold a camera. But here it feels almost intentional, like they're making it work. So to talk about a bit about the actual plot of the first arc here, Kenzeki gets kicked out of his apartment, so he moves in with Kotaro. Board is attacked by the Locust Undead, kills a lot of the people in there. Only a few survive, including Hirose, who also moves in with Kenzaki and Kotaro. Chief Karasuma goes missing. That's a character we actually didn't talk about. Karasuma, chief of board. He kind of acts as like a mentor to the riders, giving them advice from afar, because he has to stay in hiding because undead are after his life. He's a pretty good character for what few appearances he does make. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to handle things. What do you guys think of him?
Yeah, other than the fact that he's at first he is kind of a mentor, he also gains some like he becomes more of a mysterious character moving forward because of some of the stuff he does. But yeah, he's definitely interesting, and that whole sending a message telepathically thing, pretty strange, but hey, so are the undead, so whatever. And then his body burning up. Yeah, that was some weird stuff. Really weird stuff in the beginning of the show.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Decade. It was like he started off as a character who knew what the hell was up, so it worked really well. Then like you said, he caught on fire.
Okay, that was a fake body though.
I don't care. It was still creepy and very disturbing.
Well, how do you think Hirose feels?
Oh yeah, because she witnessed that.
Either way, that's nasty.
Just one slight thing to point out with the plot thing is when Ward gets attacked, everybody thinks it was Tachibana who did it.
Yep.
Which I wish they would have ran with a little bit longer than they did. But that's just a personal thing.
You feel like they cut that off a little too soon?
Yeah, because I mean, it starts off as this great thing of who that mystery thing of who's right, who's wrong kind of thing, and it works out pretty. It starts off working out pretty well. It's like, but they dropped that. Like I said, they dropped it really quick by pointing out who really did it and everything else. Like, I think the whole question of Kamen Rider Garen's loyalties could have been an excellent story arc instead of him being just some guy who's breaking. I think that storyline would have worked a little better, at least to start with. Going back on it, yeah, it works fine with the way it is, but I was a little disappointed they didn't run with the Garen possibly being a bad guy.
Yeah. The biggest reason why they think Garen did it is because Hirose sees the footage of Garen kidnapping Chief Karasuma, and so that's kind of why she jumps to the conclusion that Garen was the one who attacked Board with the Locust Undead. For the audience, we do get that shot of Garen in the closet with the Locust Undead, like, hatching from eggs. But, like, when I first watched that scene, I never felt like he was controlling them. So when we got the reveal that, like, oh, he was just shooting at them, it's like, yeah, that's what I assumed.
Well, you also get the way with the whole first episode with Garen outside of the facility just kind of watching, and then just when Tachibana or when Kensuke's calling out for him to try to get answers, he just kind of walks away.
Yeah, that one didn't help his case at all. I would like to point out how great it is with the power curve in this series. Because they get their abilities from the undead that they seal, they literally get stronger the more they go on. So Kinzaki doesn't even have his rider kick at the start. He has to seal the Locust Undead first, and that gives him his kick. But even then, is just the kick. It's not until he gets more undead that he's able to start doing combos together to make it stronger.
That was a nice touch with this series, like, because almost every other one is just, oh, you can transform, you have your finishing move. You know, then each form gets upgraded, then you get the finishing move for each form. Whereas this one is literally the more you seal them, the stronger you get.
Right. Kick, alright? He has a powered up kick. Kick, thunder. Okay, now his kick is thunder charged. Kick, thunder, muck. Okay, now it goes really fast, so it has more force behind it.
For me, this is one of the better series in terms of power ups, because of stuff like that. It goes from being, okay, well, I have this ability, let's just do it a slightly different way. It's no, let's just combine shit. You know, I've got an entire deck of cards. Let's start swiping them together to see which one adds power to this kick.
And every rider has a kick card. So Blade's is just straight up kick, but then Tachibana's is drop, and then Hajime has drill.
And all the kicks are different. They're not all just your standard rider kick.
Yep.
The closest one to an actual rider kick is Kensuke's.
Yep, because he's the main rider. Tachibana's is one of my favorite ones when he gets like all three cards for it. Drop, fire, Gemini. So he splits into as he does a literal drop kick.
Yeah, that one's also my favorite. Made me disappointed when I saw it in this series after watching the Gemini power up in Q Ranger. Because I was like, Blade did it better.
Blade did it so much better. So the main plot for the first arc is that Tachibana believes that the rider system is causing his body to fall apart. He believes it's destroying it from the inside. We later find out, though, that that's not really true. Because when you transform, like, it's all about your sync rate with the undead. You have to be a compatible user, and the better your sync rate, the stronger you will be. What the system does is it will amplify your emotions. And so because Tachibana is already afraid, it's amplifying its fear and making him more afraid, and so it's weakening his sync, and so he can't even fight as strong as he normally should be able to. This is where the character Sayako comes in, Tachibana's girlfriend. Because he's having so much trouble being afraid and stuff, thinking that his body is falling apart, he spends a lot of time with her because she comforts him. She's some kind of doctor, so he'll go to her office and fall asleep there because he feels safe there. And he does another thing that I feel Vashie will be happy to touch upon.
Yeah. This is one of the points in the series where, especially when he's at his girlfriend's office, where you really feel like he's a giant fucking crybaby. Yay, thank you, assholes. If you can hear the honking, it's because there's some asshole outside. He literally feels like a giant crybaby whenever he's in that office. Because he is so terrified of falling apart that there's a point where she is doing a puzzle of a picture of I'm assuming it was their graduation.
Yeah, they were classmates together in like high school or whatever.
He was so terrified of him falling apart that he didn't want her to finish the puzzle because I guess she would take it apart and do it again or something like that, which would be symbolism
he was worried that the puzzle would end up like him.
And so to solve that problem, his decision in his intelligence was to eat a puzzle piece so she couldn't finish the puzzle. Yeah, he lost his mind for a minute.
Vashie has the strongest reaction to that I've seen anyone have.
It was fucking stupid. I get the symbolism that was there for it, and that's fine, and I get it. But how do you have that thought of, I'm just going to eat a puzzle piece? He's not 2.
King, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I got nothing.
Alright, Decade, do you have anything on Sayako?
Yeah, she really was just a tragic character, but at least her tragedy brought some good change within Tachibana, and he finally started moving towards being who he was supposed to be. So yeah, she was definitely a good plot device and a pretty memorable one at that.
We even get to the point where Tachibana feels like maybe if I just quit being a rider, I can leave all this behind and just go and be happy with Sayako. He never does. He never brings himself to the point of actually doing it. Because, like, they're at a shopping mall together on a date, and when an undead starts attacking behind him, he's like, I can't ignore this.
Right. And for him, it ended up working well in his favor as a character. Because at that point where he decides to give up being a rider is where things start going downhill, I guess you could say, on a personal level for him. But it pushes him past the issues that he was having.
We do get a really good moment with Kotaro, where he tries giving a motivational speech to Tachibana about how everyone is afraid of something. But everyone in the city, is doing their best to, go out there and just live their life, be courageous against their fears. Tachibana actually starts to consider, like, if it's just fear that's bothering me, I can fight back against this. It is probably Kotaro's best moment in the series.
Especially considering the truth of that speech. It's like, cause like take each and every one of us for example. There are things like for me myself, I have really bad social anxiety, so I have a real issue with talking to people, especially if it's somebody new and all that. I tend to get really quiet and clam up. But I'm doing my best to get past that through. It's part of what I'm using this podcast for. Beyond the fact that I really enjoy these shows, is it's helping me to overcome that social anxiety. It's why I try talking to new people and all that. So Kotaro has a very, very good point with this, and it's very well done, especially the way he delivered that speech and the reaction that Tachibana had to it. It was very, very realistic because it is very realistic.
I like to go swimming, but I am terrified of drowning. So like whenever I like dive under the water, I'll try not to be under there for more than 3 seconds.
Decade, you want to go or you want me to?
Oh, I didn't realize we were giving confessions, but
Oh,
yeah.
put that out there.
No.
I decided to run with it.
Good. Yeah, I mean, everyone's got stuff that they have to deal with on a daily basis, and just running away from it and hoping things will get better. They might for a little bit, but eventually it's going to catch up with you. So it's just always better to face your problems head on. And sadly, Sayako has to kick the bucket for Tachibana to finally accept that. But when she does, he becomes an amazing rider. So that's nice.
King, any thoughts?
Do you want a thought or a confession?
Whatever you're willing to say.
Confess now.
Count up your
Well.
sins.
Alright. Thoughts? No. Confession? I'm somebody who thinks everybody looks at me as a screw up. And I don't know how to fix that. Because every time I feel like I do something, it's the wrong thing.
Nah,
So you
you're
guys are really...
fine.
So it's nice to be able to have that and be able to come here because I know everybody messes up at one point or another. Fact is, I mean, we still do what we do.
Right. And in terms of you being a screw up, at least you have somewhere you can go where you're not one, because you're not one here. I screw up here more than you do. If you don't believe me, go check out half the podcasts over on TokuPortal.
Go check out that last podcast where we're talking about X8 and Vashie almost opened up by saying, "Hey, welcome to Sentai."
Yeah. It's
okay, Ryan might be counting up your sins, but I'm not.
Thank you, Decade. You made me choke on Coke.
Oh, I'm even worse than Ryan.
The drink, not the drug.
Good.
So, introduce our actual main antagonist for the first arc, the Peacock Undead, who kidnaps Kenzaki to study the rider system so that he can work on creating his own. He just straight up takes him, throws him to a room with another undead, says, "Fight him for me." And then Hajime is there, and he gets him involved. And then this is when Tachibana shows up after Kotaro's big speech. And the speech didn't work for him. He's still afraid to the point where, he gets knocked out of his henshin up against the wall, and he just screams in terror. This was, yeah. That's our main antagonist for the series. Just trying to build a fourth rider, the ultimate rider, for himself. Any thoughts on this?
I'm not too certain, but is he the first undead with a human form that can talk and stuff?
Yes, besides Hajime.
Yeah. So that's definitely a good... the word escapes me. But an interesting marker to the rest of what's going to happen with the human transforming undead. It's kind of weird how they do it. It makes sense how Hajime can do it, but how the hell can the other undead?
Well, all the undead that take on a human form are Jack or higher.
Right. So I guess they have special privileges.
They're the high-level undead.
Yep. Congratulations. But yeah, in terms of villain qualities, he's a pretty interesting one because he's extremely cool-headed for the most part and calculating, whereas some of these other villains we've been having recently are total nut jobs or just blindly angry. But yeah, he's definitely an interesting villain, and he does a lot of damage to pretty much all the riders.
Right. The human transformations for the undead, it was a nice touch to give, so that way whenever one of them showed up, some shit was about to go down. It for a lot of series, it seems more that most of the quote unquote generals for the series, for most series, have some alternate form, or they look really badass or whatnot. For this, it's just, oh no, they can look like humans, so you can't know who they are. And the only one who can throughout this entire series is Hajime. Because when they're in their human forms, they don't show up on the undead locator. So literally, the only one who knows that these people are undead is Hajime, which actually does come into effect later on in the series. So it was a nice touch, especially with the fact of them pointing out that Hajime could do it, because it's something that gets called back to. But yeah, in terms of like first villains, he does a very good job of just fucking shit up. And he's very calm and collected and very egotistical, which, like Decade said, it is a nice change of pace from our more recent villains in Rider who've just been out of their fucking mind, like CEO Crazy Pants over in X8. Take your pick on which one I'm referring to, because they're both fucking nut jobs.
It's a huge contrast between both.
We've had more relaxed psychopaths, though.
Like?
You know Wizard, right? Moderately?
No.
Vashie?
Yeah, I'll give you that one. Wizard's commanders and all that were more laid back. They ended up going nuts, but they started out really normal.
Well, Sora, I think, was okay.
He went fucking bonkers for a minute.
He started off that way.
He started off more initially as like that Joker character, the one who didn't care what their boss said. He was going to do his own thing, which played very well into his characters. But there was a point where he lost his fucking mind.
Okay, what about the guy from Fose?
Yeah, that was one of the more level-headed commanders there, especially throughout for the overhaul of the series. So yeah, I guess it's more of a more recent thing that the bad guys are just out of their fucking mind.
Yeah, King, you're spot on. It's pretty much been Drive onwards where we've had some real nut jobs with temper issues.
Because, with Drive, you can't really count the Roimu themselves, because that's more what they were programmed for. So, Heart and whatnot, Heart was more just him being passionate rather than anything else. But then you have to take into account, Bano, or Bano, or whatever the fuck his name was pronounced. He was out of his mind.
But Fose backwards, then?
Yeah, that's about right. Or at least through what I've seen so far.
Sweet, I got something right.
One of Forza's main antagonists just has a superiority complex.
Oh no, Jesus, there. Okay.
He's um so earlier decade you're talking about how like running away from your problems might work for a little bit, but then they'll catch up to you. Hajime actually goes through that character arc. That is the first major one that he gets, where he feels like, okay, so people are targeting Amane because he's living there, so he tries running away. And yeah, he makes friends with this guitarist guy who is also running away from his family because his father doesn't think he'll make a good musician. And the guy starts to like look up to Hajime like an older brother. Like, hey, you're great. We can run away together. We can make this work out. Until more undead start attacking Hajime, and this new guy gets caught in the middle, and their boat gets destroyed. And that same problem comes up again, where this guy just hates Hajime because, okay, this is your fault. I don't want to see you anymore. And this strongly ties into Hajime's overall character arc, where it's like, humans won't be able to accept me for who I really am, so I just need to keep hiding it.
Yep, he's quite a tragic hero as well, especially if you're going off the missing ace timeline. That's pretty tragic.
I don't think Vashie has seen Missing Ace yet.
No, I have not. I've kind of been putting it off because it's alternate timeline.
Yeah, no one's gonna blame me for that. Just make sure you watch it in 1080p. It's pretty great.
So meanwhile, while Hajime is going through all that, Tachibana is going through his own character arc, wherein the Peacock Undead kind of recruits him by giving him what is effectively a drug that will boost his confidence. What it is this type of seaweed thing that if you soak in water with it, it kind of like boosts your instincts to fight or whatever. And so it helps Tachibana like remove his fear and fight at his full potential. But if he uses it too much, it'll break down his nervous system. And Sayoko, when she finds out about that, she tries warning him, but he just kind of stops listening to her because even his personality is being affected by this.
And so starts the plot device of Tachibana listening to the wrong people.
Yeah.
A lot. It's a big issue with him.
And the Peacock Undead, he's trying to like build a new rider. And so what the riders use is they use an ace, category ace undead to transform. So they need to capture the fourth one. So he wants Tachibana to seal the fourth category ace, the spider undead, while he looks for a compatible candidate. This is also when we get our first appearance of Mutsuki, who is being targeted by the spider undead when Kinzaki comes in and saves him. And that's Mutsuki's first encounter with the riders. We'll get more to that later. Sayoko, because she's trying to like get Tachibana away from all this negative stuff in his life, the Peacock Undead doesn't want her influencing him. She doesn't want her getting in his way, so he just outright kills her. While that's going on, Tachibana eventually does manage to seal the spider undead. He then, like, when Peacock Undead goes to him and says, like, alright, give it to me, Tachibana's like, no. And already, so we're seeing that Tachibana was may have been planning on betraying him early on just to use him. But then when he finds out that Sayoko died, that's when he really snaps and he works up the courage to seal the Peacock undead, which is a category jack. Specifically his category jack for his suit. And that is when the first arc ends. Tachibana quits being a rider after that. Any more thoughts on this? Because I feel like Tachibana's turnaround there at the end redeems his entire character, and that's like the turning point for when the show gets really good on a first watch.
Like I agree because, like I said, I've only watched this once, so yeah, this is where the series really picked up. Because it takes Tachibana from basically being this gigantic crybaby to literally standing on his own for the first time throughout this series. And doing what he has to do and moving forward and all that. It's where, in my opinion, his story really starts to take off as a writer. And where it's the first point in the series where you're actually behind him as a character, rather than just waiting for whatever storyline they were doing with him to get done, which is what I was doing up until this point. And then it was like, okay, yeah, I like you now. Let's go kick some ass. Unfortunately, that was hindered a little bit with the introduction of the fourth rider. God damn it.
Decade King, nothing?
Yeah, well, personally, I really liked even the roughness of the beginning of the show, just because Kenzaki and the Blade system, the Blade Rider system, and the music. I love Kakusei, which is the first ending insert song. That's probably one of my favorite insert songs of all time.
Oh yeah,
that
is actually
so great.
That is such a good insert song. I was disappointed when it changed.
Yeah,
I was too.
And the fact that they played it pretty religiously too. A lot of recent writer shows, they'll play their awesome insert songs like every now and then, but back in the day they used to do it almost every single episode. But not only the insert song, but just the overall soundtrack and background music for Blade. I mean, it had awesome string, like dramatic tracks. It had awesome like guitar riff fight tracks, and the Ryuki kind of mysterious electronic kind of tracks. It was just overall probably one of my favorite background music soundtracks. It definitely adds a lot of weight to the scenes.
Like musically, this series was fantastic because, like the case says, like almost the entire series is soundtracked. Like it's rare that there's not some sort of like background music in most of the scenes from episode to episode, and it's all done really well. All of the music is fitting for whatever is going on. Like even like if they're just all sitting around talking about something like kind of nice, there's still like some slight quiet background music, and I liked it. It was really good. It's something that they kind of dropped from Rider over after a while.
And that's why you should watch Missing Ace, because they literally just put like the best of the background music into that movie and then add in a new track for the Glaive Riders, and it's pretty great.
Well, obviously, being the new eyes, I don't have much to say, but Hell, any arc that ends with "Let's be friends and kick some ass," I'm happy. So I liked it.
Uh, but in the end, Peacock Undead did manage to create a fourth rider belt, which the other writers suspect, like, this one's not really okay to use. This one feels like the Spider Undead is still exerting its will out. It should not be used. Despite that, it gets used. Uh, just at Kotaro's house, when they're holding it there, the spider like influences his will and kind of hypnotizes Kotaro into trying to transform with him, but the others catch him before he does, and then the belt just vanishes. It disappears. It is later found by Mutsuki. Uh, so
Can I start? Can I start this with "fuck this kid"?
yes, you can. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Mutsuki. A kind of tragic character in his own. He's a good kid. He loves basketball. He's still in high school. It is Spider Undead's evil will that turns him into this dark character that just lusts for power. And it kind of makes him the new whiny character, which is not great coming off of Tachibana. But ultimately, he is Kamen Rider Blade. And remember earlier I said, like, everyone has their own card that is their own kick? His is Bite, wherein he scissor kicks.
I did like his kick. It was unique. The in terms of Mutsuki being a whiny asshole at the start of it, he gets a pass because it's because of the Spider Undead's influence. But it doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. Because after a while, he is no longer under the influence of the Spider Undead, and he's still a crybaby. He's just goddamn this character.
Yeah, it's kind of just. I mean, but I did like it, even in my first watch through of it, because it's a bit realistic. I mean, just being. He was literally kidnapped and experimented on. And not only that, but now he's trying to be possessed by a crazy belt. So, yeah, just him having to go through so much turmoil, it's understandable. It's not like he's just. I mean, it's definitely not the same as with Tachibana, who is just a bit irrational. Mitsuki definitely has his reasons, and it's kind of unfortunate that he turns out the way that he does, but eventually he recovers and becomes a pretty decent high school writer.
Which, unfortunately for Rai, led the way to Force. But like for a writer, like in terms of his overall characters, like I get everything he's been through, and I understand it, and everything that he's gone through is it. As much as I hate his character for the way everything plays out with him, I get it and I understand it, and in my opinion, he has one of the best storylines in terms of that misguided path to redemption. It's very well done. I just think it's a little drawn out because it's literally from episode 15 and almost until the end of the series.
Yeah, it's not resolved in his own arc.
It's it's in the the last couple of episodes that it really gets resolved.
No, but it's at like the start of the final arc.
Yeah.
And like, so the reason why the Spider Undead chose him was, first of all, he was a compatible user, but also he would easily be influenced because he is a troubled child who also feels like his mind is kind of in the darkness. That troubled part being that when he was an infant, he was kidnapped and he still has nightmares about that time. Which, that's a little hard to swallow that he would still remember something from when he was a baby.
Oh yeah, I totally forget. Well, and he was like shoved in a locker or something.
Yeah,
right?
he was hid inside like a locker, and so it was dark, and that's the part that haunts him.
Yeah.
Like, it's just really dark,
Man,
and so
he had
he's
such an edgy
afraid of
story.
the dark.
Which didn't help anything else, anything, you know, when he kind of got kidnapped again and then experimented on. That, you know, added to that irrational fear. Oh, it's not irrational for him at that point. It's a really real fear because it happened again. You know, it's like it adds justification and weight to his character with the fact that he was just so terrified of pretty much whatever could go wrong aspect. You know, it's like his fear of darkness, and I guess you can equate that to the fear of evil and whatnot. It makes sense, and it works really well with his character. So, yeah.
King, how do you feel about this character?
The precursor to Forze, who's got a little bit of a fear of the dark.
Who said little?
I'm exaggerating. Yeah, he seems like a okay character, I guess. And hey, throwing in your own wild card at the end, no pun intended. It was clever, I will admit. Doesn't exactly mean the character was up to code, but hell, they can't all be winners.
Like, when he finds the belt, like, at first it makes him feel strong, like, I could be a hero, I could be a Kamen Rider. And then, like, the Spider's Will starts hitting him, like, you want to be strong, you want more power. And Tachibana actually tries helping him against that, like, you have to fight against the will. If you're going to be a rider, you need to be fighting for the right reason, you need to be fighting to protect people, and that helps him out for a little bit, but then the Spider is still like eating away at him, like, no, strong, power, kill that guy if he's getting in your way. And this just kind of leads to, this is pretty much the crux of the second arc, which is trying to get Musuki to not be evil. At first they're trying to like take the belt away by force, but then they realize that's not going to work because it'll just teleport back to him. He also has quite a few cards already, because Peacock Undead was collecting them for him. One of which is called Remote, which can free sealed undead so he can control them. So that's just kind of something that he does early on. When the other riders try fighting him, he's like, they pull out their cards to use. It's like, nope, free those undead. Now you have to go seal them again. But yeah, Musuki is always complaining that, like, if I had stronger cards, I would be stronger, so I should just start sealing high-level undead. His character just declines more and more, no matter how many times, like, he starts to get good again.
Bless you or excuse you. I don't know which one was appropriate at that point.
That was a cough.
Oh. Like, this whole character arc, for his character, it's perfect. Because it starts out with him, like you said, I can be a hero, I want to be a hero. And then the Spider's influence, it goes from not only not only are you going to be a quote unquote hero, you're going to be the best. And you'll do whatever it takes to be the best. Which is where the evil part comes in. Because yeah, his power, the one he uses the most is remote, which, like you said, unseals the undead, and it doesn't control them beyond the initial orders or whatever. And the only orders he ever gives is just go fuck shit up. To get the riders away from me is basically all he ever uses it for to start with. Because he's a dick. But at least they did point out that primarily once he was transformed, it was pretty much all the spider, not Mutsuki, which is part of the whole everybody working with trying to get him to be past the spider's influence. Because I guess you can equate them transforming into releasing that particular undead in a manner of speaking. Because I guess that would be the easiest way to explain them using the powers and whatnot that they do. So every time he transforms, he's, for lack of a better term, transforming it into the spider. And the spider's a dick.
Yeah, that's kind of like the explanation we get later on. Let's talk about a different character now. Kiryu. Kiryu was the original applicant to be Kamen Rider Garen, but when they went to test it out, he wasn't compatible. And the test ended up fucking up his hand, and so he had to get replaced with a mechanical one. Now he kind of like blames Tachibana for it, especially since Tachibana quit being a rider. It's like, who are you to fucking quit? You are the only one that's compatible with that. And so he just kind of goes around now judging criminals by himself, by hooking up a battery to his mechanical arm, grabbing people and then by the neck and just electrocuting them to death.
Because if you're gonna fuck shit up, make a makeshift Iron Man glove. That's what I call it. Leave me alone.
He was definitely a pretty intense guy. Yeah, and really just another useful plot device for getting Tachibana off his ass, because even after he defeated the Peacock Undead, he was still kind of hesitant to get back into the fight. But holy crap, that whole Langel's whole debut was just so intense. Every time he showed up, I mean, especially the first time he showed up, and it was right after Blade and Chalice defeated an undead, and the sky got all cloudy and stuff, and intense music started playing. And every time he'd show up and summon, well, not even summon, just release undead that they had worked so hard to defeat. It was so great. And yeah, it just makes Spider that much more of an asshole when he finally deals with Kiryu's nonsense.
And what's really interesting is that at one point Mutsuki, like, he gets knocked out of his henshin in battle, and so Kiryu, like, sees his belt and he sees his opportunity. He goes over and he takes it for himself, and he's like, I'll become Lei Angle. I'll become the rider. And he becomes the evil rider that the show clearly wanted to have. Like, Mutsuki is a conflicted character. Kiryu has no qualms with it. Like, okay, I'm going to be the antagonist now. when Musuki was releasing undead, they were just running off and about. Kiryu's doing is like, yeah, no, I'm gonna have them specifically target you guys. And he prompts Tachibana to become a rider again to fight against him. And it is super well done. When I was first watching the series, I was legit like, alright, I'm down for this. I'm down for this guy being Leango, not Mutsuki. Unfortunately, it's short-lived, because as Tachibana returns to being a rider, he kind of knocks him out and hurts him enough that he loses control of the undead, and they kill him.
That was literally a great ending to that particular point. Like, as much as I wanted him to stick around and be the evil rider, I was satisfied with how it ended.
Definitely. I wouldn't ask for anything more.
Like, when I first started this series, I will admit I wasn't expecting the series to get half as dark as it did. Because the series got pretty dark with some of the storylines that they did, but this was the one true point where I feel it was literally at its darkest. Because it wasn't it wasn't just a matter of somebody getting justice served to them. I mean, it was, but it was like justice and then some. Because dead technically it's your own hand. Because if you use logic with it, if he would have never used the remote power, then there would have been no one dead to kill him. So kind of self-serving death because of his ability.
And it's kind of suggested that he wanted to die. Or at the very least, he wanted Tachibana to fight against him.
Right. It's like, and it was, for as short as it lasted, I was really, really glad it played out the way it did, even though I wanted it to go longer.
Decade?
No, I've said pretty much what I need to say on that bit.
I'm good here.
No questions?
Nah. Gives me some idea of what I'm jumping into.
Okay. So, I'm not going to go over every undead that gets sealed, but I will go over all the high-level ones. Category Jack and higher.
It's fine, I understand.
And this arc has quite a few. So, Capricorn Undead, which is Kinzaki's queen and the only male queen undead, teams up with Orchid Undead, Hajime's queen, to try and take Blade out. Earlier I mentioned that Kotaro has an episode where he falls for this girl. Yeah, that ends up being the Orchid Undead, who kind of holds Kotaro at gunpoint to get Kinzaki to not transform so Capricorn can beat the shit out of him. And it's actually, this is the first time that Hajime helps Kotaro out. Because at first he warns Kinzaki, yeah, I noticed that there was an undead near Kotaro. And then Kinzaki gets the wrong idea, he gets the wrong undead. And then later on, it's Hajime that ends up saving Kotaro from her. To the point where, way later on, after a few episodes later, Orchid Undead is damaged and hurt. Kotaro ends up helping her because he wants to believe that okay, so not all the undead, maybe they don't all have to be bad. Maybe she doesn't have to fight humans. I want to believe in you. But then she notices Hajime approaching them, and so she pretends to choke him out to kind of knock him unconscious, so she can just go and let Hajime seal her away. Like, it's incredibly subtle that she's actually doing this just to help him so that she won't fight, but it's really good. And it's one of the earliest character developments we get of the undead deciding maybe fighting isn't worth it. So from that we got 2 queens sealed, Kenzaki's Capricorn and Hajime's Orchid.
Which for, in terms of overall, for the amount of the start of the series had a pretty good run of it, to include some, high level one. It was one of the series where it actually feels like you're making progress. Because at least with this series, it was just one consistent theme with this series. It was seal the undead. That's all you had to worry about, and it's a tactic that's been used quite often. And I apologize if you can hear that helicopter. That's been used throughout Rider, whereas it's just one thing you have to do, which is this series is seal the undead. Then it just gets tougher when you have to deal with the stronger ones and then some other dumb shit that happens. Not dumb shit, it's really good. It just seemed really off-putting there with the way they did it. But whereas you get stuff where, like with Kamen Rider XA, it starts off with this whole collect these few Gashats. Then it's, defeat all these guys in this other little game that's been created. So you end up having like four or five different goals throughout the series rather than just one goal. So it was a nice touch going back to this series to watch it, to go back to something as simplistic as this and actually feel like you're making progress as the story goes on, rather than sitting there going, okay, well, they're almost done with this. What are they going to do for the next 30 episodes?
Forze was really bad about progress, too. Because the whole crux of it was like, okay, so the villains are looking for the 12th Zodiac. And so you're just waiting each episode, like, when are we going to get to a Zodiac? When is it going to happen? And they just stall it out so long, only to rapid fire a bunch of them in the end. It's like, you really could have spread this out way better. Decade King, nothing on this?
Yeah, as much as I do like Forze, that is definitely true. But yeah, in terms of that arc in Blade, it brought up kind of an interesting development, is basically well, I guess a continuation, but Kotaro actually being conflicted of having Hajime save him. Like, it actually pains him to accept the fact that he might not be a complete jerk. And so he kind of he doesn't really come to like him per se, but he does kind of accept him as Amane's guardian for now. So yeah, that was a nice development from all this craziness of the high level undead.
So we also, during this arc, get a short plot point about the Eagle Undead, which is Kenzaki's Jack. Apparently during the original battle fight, the Eagle Undead had made a deal with the Mantis Undead, which is the ace that Hajime uses to become Chalice, that they would fight each other in the finals. And when Eagle Undead realizes, like, oh, you're not Chalice, you're not the real him, he steals the ace card back, so Hajime can't fight. This is the first time Kenzaki actually helps out Hajime. he fights the undead for him to get his card back, and then he seals his Jack. This is also the first time we see a rider use a card that isn't theirs. Hajime gives Kenzaki, or lends it to him, his float card so that he can fly up and get to him. This is one of several moments that help build up their relationship.
And it is also the first time Hajime gets his card stolen.
A recurring theme.
Yes, it is.
But what's not really reoccurring is him actually transforming into another undead.
He also picks a weaker one than he has. He picks, I think, a category 4 or 5 when he has a category 8 or 9 on him. I think it was 8, yeah. He had a category 8 on him.
Or something.
He could have picked a stronger one. Yeah, this is also when we first find out that, unlike the other riders who are using the aces to borrow the form to get a suit based off of that undead, Hajime is actively turning into the undead.
Which also becomes a plot point. Because that ends up being part of the explanation for why he turns into Hajime.
Yep. Then we get we're almost done. We got a couple more plot points. We get a short little plot point about a wolf undead who can, when he kills people, he turns them into his own werewolf minions. Tachibana and Kenzaki team up to defeat him, and Kenzaki seals him. He ends up being the Jack of Hearts, so he would be Hajime's Jack. So this is the first time that a rider seals an undead that isn't their suit. And then enter Shima, the category king for clubs, the tarantula undead. He comes in from Tibet, where Chief Karasuma went to work on studying the undead. And he kind of helps Kenzaki realize, what are you actually fighting for? In which Kenzaki realizes, it takes him a while, but he realizes, oh, I'm fighting to protect people. My parents died in a fire, and there was nothing I could do about it. I want to do something about things like that. I want to protect people. And so he gives him Karasuma's newest invention, a Rouse Absorber, which uses the power of a Jack and a Queen to give an upgraded form. So Blade gets his Jack form. And he uses it to defeat the Elephant Undead, which would be Mutsuki's Jack. Because Tarantula Undead is Mutsuki's king, the Spider Undead has a grudge against him. Shima goes through this kind of arc about trying to help Mutsuki, trying to help him overcome the spider's will. So what he does is he takes a risk. He lets Mutsuki seal him in hoping that his own influence will cancel out the spider undeads to try and save Mutsuki. And that is where and so when Mutsuki seals his king, that is where the second arc ends. And this is where we also kind of stop focusing so much on Mutsuki, and Mutsuki has pretty much become an antagonist at this point. How do you feel about that?
It was a bit refreshing in a way. Well, it was definitely shocking. I mean, you watch Sentai Rider and usually you think, oh, okay, guy's gonna sacrifice himself. Obviously, it's gonna turn out well. Wrong. But it's a bit refreshing because for a while it kind of allows the writers to put Mutsuki in the background because now he's not so conflicted. I mean, he's just a bad guy for now. So it allows them to focus on the other characters. So yeah, I think it was definitely a good, really good call and interesting plot twist.
Right, I agree. Usually, with the self-sacrifice of anybody, it usually ends up, especially in a situation like this, where it's done to help a character who's lost his way, kind of thing. It usually, typically, is the point where that character turns around, and for this sacrifice to pretty much just end up failing was a unique aspect for this show. I mean, overall, in the end, it does end up having a point, and it does end up helping overall in the long run. It was still refreshing to have that. Here's something different, because most Kamen Rider, especially, is still usually pretty kind of dark overall. It's like, but it's usually more lighthearted than Blade seemed. Blade seemed really kind of dark and gritty with some of the aspects of it, this being one of them, where it's just you're sitting going, fuck, how's this gonna get fixed now? So, and it was just a really, really nice touch, in my opinion. And it, like the kid said, it did let them start taking the focus off of him so much to it. Like, they still worked on his character, and it's not one of those where they just kind of dropped him. They just kind of pushed him off to the background. They still developed his character throughout the rest of the series, but it let them pull the focus from him onto other characters and other storylines that they had.
It really did wonders for Mutsuki's character. You have this character that's like, okay, so everyone is pushing for him to be a good character, but meanwhile the Spider Undead is just literally in his mind being like, no, but evil though. And you just see him slowly go from, I want to be a hero, I want to be the rider, to, if I had more cards I could be stronger. I'm the strongest. I'm the best though. And you just really see like how this is all getting to him. Especially with the way he treats his girlfriend Nozomi, who we haven't been talking about, but even she notices that like Mutsuki is changing throughout the series. King, did you have anything to say or ask?
No, not right now.
Well, we're just about to end this, so
Due to the length of this going a lot longer than I had initially anticipated, which I have no problem with, in the fact that we do kind of have lives, and for at least two of us it's 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, and we're halfway through the series, so this seems like a good point to stop. We'll pick it up again next week. The third arc has a lot of exposition, so it's not something we can just get through. So King, if you have anything to say or ask, now is the time.
Mm-mm.
Alright, well, Vashi, what did you have to say?
Nothing.
Alright.
Just closing remarks for the podcast. Thank you guys for stopping by and listening. Those of you that did, those of you that come back for the non-live stream version of this. Thank you guys here on the podcast for showing up. This was something I've been wanting to do for a while, so it was nice that it actually happened. We will probably pick up part 2 of this, which will be the second half of Blade, next week. Most likely about the same time. So thank you guys for all showing up, and I'll see you guys next week. You guys can finish it off with your guys' closing statements.
Yeah, closing arguments. No, but it's been fun. I mean, this podcast has been almost 2 hours, but I'm not tired at all. It's been a lot of fun talking about this show, which is such a good Rider show, really. And I'm looking forward to part 2. Thanks for listening, everyone.
I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot about it too. Can't wait for next time. Later, taters.
This is a phenomenal Rider series, and if we were going to do like a full series podcast or any of them, this was definitely like the one of the top 2 on my list for like, yeah, we should do this one. Just it just keeps getting better as it goes on, and I cannot wait for next time to talk about the ending, because I feel like this has the best ending of any Rider series. So see you next time.
I agree, and just for those wondering, the idea for this podcast truly did come from Rye. I had binge watched this series. I say binge, but it took me about 2 months to do so. And he commented about doing a BladeCast, and I was like, sure, let's do it. So,
like Vashie said, he was watching it for the first time. What would make a better time to do a BladeCast than when someone just watched it, get their fresh opinions on it?
So, and yes, I said closing arguments to leave me alone. I forgot what we were doing. I knew I'd fuck up something during this podcast.
Your Honor, in conclusion, Blade is awesome.
I don't know what the verdict for that would be, because it would that be not guilty or guilty? I brain farted on that.
Alright.
But at least I didn't. At least that's how I screwed up, and not by starting this podcast going, "Hey, welcome to TokuPortal." I was pretty sure I was going to do that, but see you guys next week. And if you guys want, check if anybody here who has not been to TokuPortal's page, go check them out. It's where all of us are usually at on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for Kamen Rider podcasts and for Super Sentai podcasts. Later.